My best friend always said his stepdad saved him after his real father walked out. That man became family to me too. Barbecues, advice, late-night talks. So when I came home unexpectedly and heard that familiar voice in our bedroom, saying my wife's name like it belonged to him, my world tilted. I stood outside the door, phone in hand, recording without thinking. Through the crack, I watched her cling to him, whispering things she'd never said to me. No panic when she saw me, just a slow smile, like I'd interrupted something normal. The betrayal wasn't just her cheating. It was choosing the one man my best friend idolized. How was I supposed to tell him his hero just destroyed my life? I didn't burst in. I didn't shout or throw anything or demand answers. I stayed exactly where I was, pressed against the hallway wall, the phone trembling slightly in my hand. Part of me was already detached, like my body had decided this moment was too important to experience fully. Recording felt automatic, not calculated, like proof was something I might need later, even if I didn't yet understand why. They didn't rush to separate. That's what struck me most in the seconds that followed. He rested his hand on her lower back, steady and familiar. She leaned into him as if my presence was an inconvenience, not a disaster. When he finally noticed me, his face didn't drain of color. He didn't stammer. He just nodded once, slowly, like this conversation had always been inevitable. "We should talk," he said. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. I turned and walked away instead, down the hallway, into the kitchen, where the smell of dinner still hung in the air. A pot sat cooling on the stove, something she'd started hours earlier, something domestic and ordinary. I sat at the table and stared at the surface where we'd eaten 100 meals together, where my best friend's stepdad had once helped me sand down a rough edge after I'd botched a repair. The memory felt contaminated now, like touching something that used to be clean. They came out a minute later, maybe two. Time had stopped behaving normally. She spoke first. "This isn't what you think." I looked up at her then, really looked. She wasn't crying. Her face wasn't twisted with guilt or fear. She looked resolved, like someone who'd already made peace with the outcome and was just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. "You don't get to say that," I replied, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. It didn't feel like my own. He cleared his throat again. A nervous habit I'd seen 1,000 times before meetings, before advice, before moments where he liked to present himself as the adult in the room. "I never meant for you to find out like this," he said. That sentence cracked something open inside me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was revealing. Find out. Not stop. Not change. Just find out. "How long?" I asked. She answered without hesitation. Long enough that lying about it felt worse than telling the truth. I nodded, absorbing that. Long enough to build routines. Long enough to justify. Long enough to smile at my best friend across a table while sleeping with the man he trusted most. I stood up then, finally feeling the weight in my legs. "You should go," I said to him. He hesitated, glanced at her. She didn't look back. "I'll call you," she said to him quietly. Not if, not later, just when. He passed me on his way out, close enough that I could smell the same cologne he'd worn for years, the same one I'd once complimented. He paused at the door. "I know this hurts," he said, as if acknowledging pain was the same as respecting it. When the door closed behind him, the house felt hollow. She sat down across from me like we were about to negotiate something. Terms, boundaries, next steps. I realized then that she had already moved on emotionally. Whatever grief was coming, It wasn't hers. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I stared at her, at the woman I'd built a life around, and understood something with sudden clarity. This wasn't just an affair. It was a fracture that ran through every relationship around us. There was no clean way out. No version of this where someone didn't lose everything they believed in. And somewhere out there, my best friend still thought his stepdad was the man who taught him what loyalty looked like. I didn't answer her question. I picked up my phone, locked the screen, and stood. Because before I could decide what to do about my marriage, I had to face the truth that terrified me more than being alone. I was about to destroy someone I loved, no matter what I chose next. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch with the lights off, staring at the faint glow of the smoke detector, listening to the house settle into its familiar noises. Every sound felt rehearsed, like the place itself had known before I did. She stayed in the bedroom. I could hear her moving around occasionally, the soft thud of a drawer, the whisper of sheets. No crying, no pacing. That silence told me more than any confession ever could. By morning, she was already dressed, calm, purposeful. She poured herself coffee like it was any other weekday, like the night before hadn't cracked something open that couldn't be sealed again. "We should talk later," she said, reaching for her keys. "About what?" I asked. She paused, just long enough to register annoyance. "About what this means." That was the problem. She was already thinking in terms of definitions and outcomes. I was still trying to breathe without feeling like my chest was caving in. After she left, I replayed the video on my phone for the first time. I hated myself for it, but I needed to confirm it hadn't been some distorted memory born from shock. The angle was bad, the sound uneven, but it was enough. Her voice was unmistakable. So was his. Familiar cadence, familiar comfort. The way you sound when you're not pretending. I stopped it before the end and locked my phone. Some things, once seen, don't need repetition. My best friend texted me that afternoon, a stupid meme, something we'd normally laugh at. I stared at the notification until it faded. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Every word felt like a lie now. Every casual exchange felt like I was standing on a trap door, waiting for it to give. When she came home that evening, she acted like we were negotiating a truce, sat across from me at the table, folded her hands, took a breath. "This wasn't planned," she said. I nodded. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted her to keep talking. "It started as conversations," she continued. "He understood me. He listened. You've been distant." There it was, the slow shift of responsibility. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to see how far she'd take it. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she added. "But it did, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't matter." That sentence landed harder than anything else. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I made a mistake." Just an acknowledgement that it mattered to her. "And him?" I asked. She hesitated. "He cares. Cares. About my wife, about his stepson's best friend's marriage, about none of the lines he crossed." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street looked the same as it always had. Kids riding bikes, a neighbor dragging trash cans back up the driveway. Life continuing, indifferent. "You know what you've done," I said quietly. "You didn't just betray me." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was steady. "I know, and I hate that part, but I can't undo it." That was when I realized she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for acceptance. Over the next few days, the tension settled into something heavier. She stayed out late, didn't hide it, didn't explain. When I asked where she'd been, she answered honestly, which somehow hurt more than the lies would have. She spoke his name like it was no longer forbidden, like the secrecy phase was over, and this was just the new reality. I stopped answering my best friend's messages altogether. He noticed, of course. He called, left a voicemail asking if everything was okay, if he'd done something wrong. Hearing his concern nearly broke me. I deleted the message without replying. The house felt divided now. Two people moving around each other, careful but unafraid. She slept in the bedroom. I stayed on the couch. Sometimes she'd sit near me and try to talk about logistics, therapy, space, options. I listened without committing to anything. One night she said, "He wants to talk to you." I laughed then, a short, hollow sound that surprised both of us. "No," I said. "He doesn't." She frowned. "He feels terrible." "That makes one of us," I replied. She didn't push. She didn't need to. The damage was already spreading outward, touching everything. Every shared memory now carried an expiration date. Every future plan felt theoretical. What she didn't understand, what neither of them understood, was that the worst part hadn't happened yet. The real explosion wasn't the affair. It was the truth waiting to be handed to the one person who still believed in both of them. My best friend trusted me, trusted his stepdad, trusted the world he'd been told was stable after so much loss, and I was the only one standing between him and a truth that would shatter that foundation completely. Each day I stayed silent. The weight grew heavier. Each day I delayed, I felt myself becoming complicit in the lie. By the end of that week, I knew I couldn't carry it alone anymore. Something was going to give, and when it did, it wouldn't just be my marriage that broke. I told myself I was protecting him, that every extra day of silence bought him one more morning where the world still made sense. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I was afraid of watching the light go out of someone I loved. Afraid that once the words left my mouth, there would be no version of any of us that survived intact. It was my sister who finally broke the stalemate. She called because she always calls when I go quiet for too long. She didn't ask what was wrong at first. She talked about nothing, weather, work, her dog. Then she said, "You sound like someone standing on a ledge." I don't remember deciding to tell her. I just did. The story came out uneven and rushed, like it was escaping me. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. "That man?" she said finally. "Your friend's stepdad?" "Yes." "And your wife knows you know?" "Yes." Another pause. Then, "You're not wrong for what you're feeling, but you can't carry this alone." "I don't want to destroy him," I said. My voice cracked on him. She was quiet for a moment. "You didn't destroy anything," she said carefully. "You're just the one holding the match someone else already lit." That night, I sat in my car in an empty parking lot and listened to a voicemail I'd ignored for days. My best friend again. His voice was lighter this time, joking, asking if I'd fallen off the planet. At the end, he added, "Hey, my stepdad's been weird lately. Distant. You haven't noticed anything, have you?" That was the moment I understood something I'd been avoiding. He already felt the fracture. He just didn't know where it ran. I met him 2 days later at a diner we'd been going to since college. I picked the booth facing the window so he couldn't read my face right away. He showed up smiling, clapped me on the shoulder, launched into a story about work. I watched him talk and felt a strange grief for the version of him that didn't yet know. "Is everything okay?" he asked finally, studying me. "No," I said. He didn't joke then. He nodded once. "Okay. What's going on?" I told him slower than I'd told anyone else. I chose my words carefully, like stepping through glass. I didn't show him the video. I didn't need to. The truth was enough. When I said his stepdad's name, something in his face changed. Not anger at first, but disbelief. A tightening around the eyes. A retreat. "No," he said quietly. "That's not possible." "I wish it weren't," I said. He shook his head once, then again, harder. He wouldn't. Not him. I let the silence do the work. Eventually, the disbelief collapsed inward. He stared at the table like it might explain itself. "How long?" he asked. "I don't know exactly," he swallowed. "Did my mom know?" "I don't think so." That almost broke him more than anything else. We sat there until our coffee went cold. At one point he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound, and said, "Do you know how many times I told people that man saved me?" "I know," I said. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just got very still, like someone bracing for impact that had already happened. When he finally stood up, he hugged me. Hard, longer than usual. "I'm sorry," he said into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." That was the moment I realized something else. He was already choosing a side, and it wasn't the one I feared. The fallout was quiet, but immediate. He confronted his stepdad alone. I didn't hear details at first, just that the man didn't deny it, didn't apologize, said something about connection, about adults making choices. My friend left without shouting, without closure. At home, my wife sensed the shift before I told her. She asked if I'd talked to him. I said yes. Her face fell, not with guilt, but with irritation. "You didn't have to involve him," she said. "He was already involved," I replied. "You just didn't want him to know." That argument ended something. Not loudly, cleanly. Within days, the web unraveled. Family dinners canceled, calls unanswered. Her certainty cracked when the man she'd chosen retreated into damage control. Suddenly, there were tears, regret, a desire to work on us. But something had settled in me, a clarity I hadn't expected. I hadn't lost everything. I'd learned where I stood and who stood with me. The hardest truth wasn't that my marriage was ending. It was that silence had cost me more than honesty ever could. And now, there was one final choice left to make. The night everything finally came apart was quieter than I expected. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just the slow, deliberate sound of truth being forced into the open, whether anyone was ready for it or not. My wife asked me to sit down after dinner. She'd cooked like she always did when she wanted to feel in control, something warm, familiar, meant to soften whatever came next. We sat across from each other at the same table where we'd planned vacations, argued about money, laughed over stupid stories. The table felt like neutral ground once. Now it felt like a witness. "He's leaving town," she said, as if that were an answer to a question I hadn't asked. I didn't respond. "He thinks it's best if we don't see each other anymore," she continued. "At least not for a while." "Does that make this better?" I asked. She hesitated. "It makes it survivable." There it was. Not love, not remorse. Survival. She leaned forward, hands wrapped tightly together. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like this. I never wanted to hurt your friend." "You didn't think about him at all," I said quietly. "That's the difference." She flinched, but she didn't deny it. "I know you're angry," she said. But we've built a life together. That has to count for something. I looked at her then and saw how carefully she'd framed it. Built, as if what we had was a structure you could reinforce after the foundation cracked, as if betrayal was just a storm you boarded up against. You chose him knowing exactly who he was to me, I said, and to my best friend. You didn't just cross a line, you erased it. Tears finally came, but they felt late, like a performance that missed its cue. I was lonely, she said. You were always somewhere else. I nodded slowly. So were you. The silence stretched. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed. Ordinary life, continuing without permission. What do you want? She asked. The question landed heavier than anything else, because this time she meant it. No bargaining, no rehearsed outcomes, just the reality that whatever came next would be permanent. I thought about my best friend sitting alone in his apartment, replaying every memory he'd ever had with the man who raised him. I thought about the way he'd hugged me in that diner, apologizing for something that wasn't his fault. I thought about the version of myself who had stood outside a bedroom door, recording because some instinct knew I'd need proof to believe my own life. I want out, I said. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, something in her expression hardened. Not anger, but calculation. You're throwing everything away. No, I replied. I'm finally choosing something. We didn't fight after that. There was nothing left to argue about. She asked practical questions, timelines, logistics, what we'd tell people. I answered what I could. The rest didn't matter yet. I packed that night. Not everything. Just enough. Clothes, documents, the things that were unquestionably mine. Each item I folded felt like a small acknowledgement that this was real, that there would be no rewinding. As I zipped the bag, my phone buzzed. A message from my best friend. He tried to explain himself. I didn't let him. I told him not to contact me again. I stared at the words for a long time before replying. I'm sorry. The reply came almost immediately. You don't need to be. I believe you. That's enough. That broke something open in me I hadn't realized was still holding. I left before sunrise. The house was dark, unfamiliar without the weight of expectation in it. I stood in the doorway one last time, listening. She didn't wake up, or maybe she pretended not to. Either way, it felt fitting. As I drove away, I realized the choice hadn't been between honesty and loss after all. It had been between staying silent and becoming someone I didn't recognize, or leaving and accepting the damage as the price of truth. I didn't know what came next. I only knew that the worst part was over. Or so I thought. I wish I could say the ending was clean. That after I left before sunrise, the pain thinned out into something manageable, like fog burning off. For a few days, I almost believed it might. I stayed with my sister, kept my movements small, answered only the messages that mattered. My best friend checked in twice. Short texts, careful words. You okay? And then I'm here if you need me. Every time I saw his name light up my screen, my chest tightened with a kind of gratitude I didn't deserve anymore. Because I'd told myself that at least one thing in my life was still solid. Then the small inconsistencies started catching on my mind like burrs. It wasn't anything dramatic. It was the way he didn't ask for details, even though he always asked. The way he didn't sound confused, just weary. The way he texted like someone reading from a script he'd rehearsed privately. And the more I sat with it, the more I realized I'd been focusing on the obvious betrayal because it was easier than looking at the shape of everything around it. On the fourth day, my wife emailed me a single line. "Can we talk in person?" No apology. No explanation. Just an attempt to reclaim space in my life like she still had a key. I didn't reply. But something in me needed to see the edges of the truth. Needed to know if I was leaving the right thing, or if I was leaving too late. So I did what I hadn't done since the night I recorded through a crack in the door. I drove without a plan, letting my hands take me where they remembered. I ended up outside my best friend's place. I sat in my car for a long time, watching people come and go with groceries and laundry baskets, living their normal lives without any idea that my world had turned inside out. I told myself I was just going to check on him, that he'd been hurt too, that I owed him a face-to-face conversation, a real one, not the thin kind you can fit into a text bubble. I buzzed. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, and there was a softness in it that almost pulled me backward into the old version of us. "You here?" "Yeah," I said. I wanted to see you." A pause. "Not long, but long enough." "Come up," he said. "Doors open." The hallway smelled like someone's dinner and someone else's detergent. Ordinary. Safe. I climbed the stairs, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying to hold on to the idea that whatever happened next would be human, not cruel. His door was unlocked, just like he said. I pushed it open. At first, my brain refused to arrange what my eyes were seeing into anything coherent. My wife was on his couch, not perched on the edge like a visitor, not stiff with awkwardness. She was curled into the corner like she'd been there long enough to claim the best spot. A mug sat on the coffee table in front of her, half drunk. My best friend's stepfather stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the parking lot as if he were waiting for someone. And my best friend, was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup like he'd just finished hosting. All three of them in the same room, moving around each other with a familiarity that didn't belong to crisis management. It belonged to routine. My best friend turned first. When he saw me, his face didn't register surprise. It registered timing. "Hey," he said again, quieter this time, like he was trying to keep the temperature of the room from changing too fast. My wife's head turned slowly. She didn't jump up. She didn't rush to explain. She gave me that same small smile she'd given me at home, the one that made my skin feel too tight. The stepfather didn't even flinch. He just watched me in the reflection of the window, calm as a man who believes he's still in control of the story. I stood in the doorway with my hand still on the knob, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing was. "What is this?" I managed. My wife set her mug down carefully. "We needed to talk," she said, as if this were the most reasonable thing in the world. I looked at my best friend. "You knew." He didn't deny it. He didn't scramble for words. He just leaned back against the counter and folded his arms like a man settling into an argument he'd already had in his head 100 times. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said. That sentence landed like a door closing. My voice came out thin. "How long?" He glanced at his stepfather, then back at me, and the look on his face wasn't guilt the way I'd expected. It was something closer to resignation. Like he'd been living with this compromise for so long, it had stopped feeling sharp. "A while," he admitted. My wife's eyes stayed on me, steady. "It started as confrontations," she said, repeating the exact word she'd used at our table, like she'd practiced it. like it was part of a script they'd all agreed would sound the least ugly. I took a step forward without realizing it. "And you," I said to my best friend, because I couldn't keep pretending the center of this wasn't him. "You let it happen." He swallowed, and for a moment I saw something flicker, something human. "You don't understand," he said. "Help me," I replied. His jaw tightened. He looked down, then back up, choosing honesty like it was the last card he had left. "I was jealous," he said quietly. "Not of you, not of her, of what you had, of how steady your life looked." I stared at him, trying to fit that confession into the boy I grew up with, the man who'd held my shoulder at funerals and toasted me at my wedding. He kept going, words coming faster now, like once the dam cracked, it couldn't be repaired. "He's always been—" He nodded toward the stepfather without looking at him. "He's always been the center of every room in my life. Even when he was saving me, it was still him. His rules, his way. And you. You came in and you didn't need him. You liked him, sure, but you didn't orbit him." The stepfather shifted slightly, irritation passing over his face like a cloud. My wife's expression stayed composed, but her fingers tightened around her mug. My best friend's voice grew quieter, almost ashamed. I thought if he crossed a line, if he did something undeniable, I'd finally be able to stop calling him my hero. I'd finally be free of him. I felt the room tilt the same way it had outside my bedroom door, that sick, unreal angle. "So you— what? You pushed him toward my wife?" My friend didn't answer right away. His silence did it for him. My wife finally spoke, as if she couldn't tolerate the quiet. "It wasn't like that," she said. "He didn't force me. No one forced me." "I know," I said, and the simplicity of it surprised me. That was the worst part. There was no coercion to blame, no single villain to carry it all. Just choices, just people choosing what they wanted and calling it complicated, so they wouldn't have to call it cruel. My best friend stepped closer, palms open. "I never thought it would get this far," he said. "I thought it would be a mistake, something that would stop, something that would show me the truth about him without destroying everything." "And me?" I asked. "Where was I in that plan?" His eyes dropped. "I didn't think about you the way I should have." The stepfather finally spoke, voice smooth, practiced. "This doesn't need to be uglier than it already is," he said. That sentence, "ugal higher than it already is," was so calm, so controlled, that something inside me went quiet. Not anger, not fear, clarity. I looked at my wife, and I realized she wasn't sitting there because she was sorry. She was sitting there because she still believed in her ability to manage outcomes, to reshape the narrative, to decide what counted as normal. I looked at my best friend, and I saw the grief underneath his jealousy, the way he'd tried to burn down his own idol and didn't care who got caught in the smoke. And in that moment, I understood the final truth. If I spoke, if I shouted, if I demanded explanations, it would only feed the circle they'd already formed. It would make me part of their twisted little system. Reaction, response, repair, repeat. A loop. I didn't want a loop. I wanted an exit. So I did something that didn't match the drama they were bracing for. I said nothing. I let the silence sit on the room like a heavy blanket, and I watched them squirm under it. Not because silence is powerful, but because it refuses to cooperate. It refuses to play the role they've assigned you. My best friend took another step toward me. "Please," he said, voice breaking, "don't disappear." I met his eyes, and what I felt wasn't hatred. It was morning. "You already let me go," I said softly. Then I turned around. I walked back down the stairs without rushing, without stumbling. I got into my car. I drove away. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't send the video to anyone. I didn't write a public post or demand a meeting or chase closure through other people's mouths. I changed my number. I moved my things quietly. I picked a small apartment across town and filled it with only what I needed: a bed, a table, a lamp that didn't buzz. I told my sister the basics and asked her not to relay messages. I blocked my wife. I blocked my best friend. I blocked the man I used to call family. Some nights, I still wake up and feel the phantom weight of that moment. The doorway, the couch, the three of them arranged like an answer I never wanted. But the feeling passes quicker now, because I'm not trying to fix what was built to betray me. The last thing I ever heard from my best friend came through my sister weeks later. He'd left a message, voice ragged, asking for one more conversation. I didn't return it. Not because I didn't care, because I finally did. And caring, I learned, sometimes looks like choosing a life where you stop volunteering to be hurt.